All right, so welcome back to another episode of Unlearn with us. I am so pleased and so honored that Tamar Huggins Grant uh, offered, well, after I asked, offered to join us on Unlearn with us. Um, I came across Tamar on LinkedIn after she had made reference to our amazing director at the Ottawa Carleton District School Board, Camille Williams Taylor. I always get it. It's Williams Taylor. I always want to say Taylor Williams. I don't know why. Um, just before we jump in, I was going to try and put together my own introduction, and Tamar has this beautiful website, and she does a wonderful job explaining how amazing she is. So I'm just going to read a few things from her introduction. So Tamar Huggins is an award-winning social entrepreneur, author, and tech education trailblazer whose work is featured exclusively on Blavity. I don't even know what Blavity is. Maybe you can fill us in on that.
Yeah, I will.
Okay. BET, Black Enterprise, CBC, CP24, and the Huffington Post, to name a few. After helping Black and female tech founders raise over $1.1 million to launch their tech startups in Canada, Tamar realized the importance for young girls and children of color to see positive reflections of themselves within the tech industry. In 2015, Tamar launched TechSpark, which I can't wait to hear more about, Canada's first technology and design school committed to empowering girls and children of color through innovative tech education. As a result of her endeavors, Tamar was named the Harry Jerome Young Entrepreneur and honored as one of 100 Black women to watch in 2015. In 2017, Tamar was honored as Canada's top 150 Black women creating impact across the nation by CBC and Her Story in Black. Despite being told a Black woman would never be successful in tech, Tamar raised six-figure investments for TechSpark, educated over 1,500 youth in under 2 years, and is on track to educate 70,000 youth by 2020 or 2022. Wow. That is unbelievable. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yes. When I looked up your website, I was after I had messaged you because I messaged you quickly on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, "Whoa! I didn't realize who I was emailing." And I like I said, I'm honored that you would take the time to chat. So I would love to hear. I looked at your website. I looked at TechSmart. I looked at Edulytic. I would love to hear more about these two programs.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, TechSpark Canada is an organization that I started back in 2015, and it is the first tech program that really focuses on educating Black girls, racialized youth, newcomer youth, really giving them the tech skills that they need in order to become creators instead of just consumers. And so we started out as a program in 2015, and since then we've grown into an organization. Now we focus on education reform. And so we work with school boards across the GTA in order to, revise curriculum so that it's more culturally relevant, responsive, and sustaining. And we also work with teachers to increase their capacity when it comes to equitable education. So we provide training in that space. We do the same training for corporations as well, who do have a tech program in-house that they're looking to audit or make it more equitable to more diverse groups and students. And then we also run courses. So we do everything from coding to virtual reality to augmented reality, AI, gaming, you name it. So we really focus on giving underprivileged youth access to advanced tech education.
So where would they do this? Where would a youth take one of your programs?
So we do our programs in the schools.
Okay.
We work directly with individual schools. We also run our programs through youth-led or youth-focused organizations across the GTA. So usually for the summer March break, they'll hire us to come in and deliver programs to the young people that they're already serving. So that's typically how we deliver it. We're looking at doing virtual courses as well this year. So in 2020, in the fall, we're looking at transferring some of the work that we've done in person to online so that we can reach more children.
Amazing. So you
Yeah.
mentioned that you work with teachers on curriculum and making it more diverse. What
Mhm.
does that look like? What kinds of things are you doing with them?
So we first take a look at the curriculum itself. So we do an audit. We look at how equitable the curriculum is first, and we look for any holes or any gaps in the curriculum. And we really try to redesign the courses so that they are student-centered, student-focused. And essentially how that works is we do a very in-depth interview with potential students. We ask them, about their experience in that particular program or course. We ask students who have graduated what their experiences were. We interview teachers and really just take a deep look into any insights that we can use to make the program better. So we really work with teachers as part of that process. So it's a very collaborative process. We don't ever like to create things and just parachute it into the school. But we do, obviously recognize the value that teachers bring to their own classrooms and want to make sure that we include that in the redesign. So when it comes to training teachers, we also do the same thing, take the same approach where we look for any gaps. One thing I know about teachers is, they definitely want to have room to sort of navigate and, do their own thing and customize, their classrooms and be able to internalize their own information rather than giving them, here's what you have to do and do it exactly this way. And so we really audit how the teachers are performing in class, look for any gaps when it comes to any equitable education, and we really build our courses for training around what we see is missing. So a lot of it may have to do with, say, unconscious bias, anti-Black racism training, really understanding what does culturally responsive pedagogy mean? How does that show up in the classroom? And really taking those hands-on experiences and having the teachers go through them. So we take a lot of our learnings from Gloria Ladstone Billings and her whole theory on culturally responsive pedagogy, as well as Chris Emden with his pedagogy as well. And we take a look at how we can fuse that with the Canadian curriculum, making sure that we're able to bring in the experiences of our students into the actual curriculum, because we've realized that once we're able to connect the teacher to the student, then that teacher can then connect the student to the content. And that's the piece that tends to be missing.
That's amazing. So what's your background? Like, are you tech? Like, is your education in tech? Is it in education? What is your
No,
background?
so my background is actually in creative advertising.
Okay.
So I started out in the industry working with amazing clients like Nike and H&M Canada, and I feel like that experience really pushed me to think innovative. And so I've always been a problem solver, and so being pushed, especially with certain clients that are always demanding innovation all the time for every single campaign, it really pushes you to think outside the box and how you can really reach your customers in a new way with a new product every time. And so I've taken a lot of what I've learned there and applied it to technology and applied it to the education space, because it's a space that I've been very passionate about. It's a space that I've been operating in for the past 8 years. And it's something that for me, I feel that the benefit that myself and my company are able to provide to school boards is that we're actually not teachers. So while we do have teachers on our team who do the curriculum work and who do the training, a lot of the strategy comes from entrepreneurs who have a different vantage point, because we're looking at things from the outside in, where sometimes when you're really connected to a problem, you don't always see what the problem is, or you don't always see what the solution could be. And having that different view or that different lens that entrepreneurship oftentimes provides has really been beneficial for us.
And how are you received in the schools? Is this something that teachers have to do, or is this something that teachers say, I would love to work with Tamar and her team?
Yeah. So one thing I've always said is that I never ever want anyone to feel forced to do anything, because I mean, when you try to force someone to change their ways, it often ends up being much more difficult, or much more detrimental than, not sort of intercepting that. So we like to take the approach of working with school boards who have innovative, very radical leadership, who know what the problems are, who listen to the community, who have already started to make those identifications of what those challenges are, and who have already started to implement, some of those solutions, which is what I really love about one of our partners, the Durham District School Board. And so I know you mentioned Camille Williams Taylor. She was a superintendent there. She was the one who brought us in.
Okay.
And so without her leadership, that whole partnership wouldn't have happened. And so we've been grateful to have access to other superintendents that have a very sort of unique view with education. It's not sort of bound in this constrictive way, but it's they're more open-minded. They're much more innovative. I think because they're also a younger school board, their culture is a lot different than, say, some school boards that have maybe been around for longer, like, say, the Toronto District School Board. Every culture is different,
Right.
but we tend to begin our work with those who we don't have to convince, because we're able to then use those experiences to then show other boards who might not be at that level what we can help them achieve.
Amazing. So yes, the connection to Camille. So does that mean that you might be expanding beyond the GTA and moving our way?
Yes, absolutely. So we've been chatting with the Ottawa Carleton District School Board for about a year now, and
That's amazing.
I know that Camille has moved over there as director of education. So really just following her lead in terms of what she's looking for, what she's hoping to achieve, and just really supporting that. And from what I've experienced, the leadership there seems very willing, to bring us in and to start doing some groundwork. And we're really excited to do that, to expand really, really outside of the GTA
That's
into
amazing.
England. Yeah.
That's amazing. So okay, so that's Tech Spark. Then I started to read about Edulytic.
Mm-hmm.
This one I'm super pumped about.
Thank you.
And I'm gonna guess that there might be some pushback on this because teachers are afraid,
Teachers are afraid.
you know?
So Edulytics is actually a scaled version of the work that we already do with TechSpark.
Okay.
So November of last year, I really thought, how can we reach more kids? Because in my head, I'm always thinking, like, I want to reach as many young people as I can and impact as many lives as I can. And the only way that we can really do that is through technology. And so I came up with a concept of developing a platform that uses data science and artificial intelligence to be able to automate the work that we're doing. So essentially identifying, what those cultural learning styles are. Again, using, strong theory from Gardner's multiple intelligences to Gloria Ladson-Billings' teachings, and really taking that theory that's been around for so long and saying, okay, well, here's how we can scale this now through technology. We can identify, how these students learn, how they retain information, how they share information, and then create insights that will help the teacher with their instruction inside the classroom. So it's really about sort of shifting how we see classroom teaching from more of a kind of let's just teach one way, one very Eurocentric way, to let's identify who's in our classroom and start to facilitate and coach them through plans that really speak to the individual student, and how they specifically learn the information. So again, that we can see higher success, higher, retention, engagement, and rigor within the students.
I love that you have a piece of technology that focuses on relationships,
Yes.
which so many people never see the two going hand in hand, right? They always see technology means we're, getting further away from each other, but you wanting to use it to bring people together and to understand one another.
Yes, absolutely. I think that the best form of AI keeps technology and that human connection together. I think, without that human connection, it starts to become very problematic.
Yeah.
I've always been, a champion for human and technology interaction. Like the two of them have to work hand in hand. Absolutely. And I think that when it does work hand in hand, it sort of eases those fears with people who think, oh my God, technology is going to take my job, or, I'm being forced to learn all these new things that I've never had to do for the past 20 years. But when we start to incorporate the teacher, their experiences into the design of the platform, we see a lot of those anxieties reduced. We actually see more excitement. And then again, that comes from my background in advertising, because we really have to understand who it is that we're building campaigns for. So we've really taken that thinking. Right now, we call it UX design. So user experience design really focuses on building products or services that solve problems for the individual user. And a lot of that comes from interviewing, asking questions, validating assumptions, invalidating assumptions, and coming up with the right solution and building that, versus saying, I think you want this, let me build it, and then it flops, right? So we've worked really closely with the Durham District School Board and their leadership to build out what Edulytics should look like. So really getting their insight helps us to identify, what those first features will look like. Making sure that we're not giving too much of what they may not need, because they may have other platforms that they use, but making sure that we are focusing on that one thing and then just exploiting that, which for us is really identifying those culturally responsive learning styles and providing insights around that, because that's one of the sore points that we've heard with teachers, is that engagement is something that they feel very strongly about. And especially with moving things online, there's this thought process of, well, how do I connect with my students? Especially if they're dependent learners, how do I maintain that engagement? What if they are English as a second language students? How do I maintain that engagement? So these are real problems that can be very traumatic to students if they're not dealt with properly. And so that's why we take that, those deep learnings and understandings to be able to build what we have.
So if I'm using Edulytics, how do I use it? What do I like? Is the teacher using it? Are the kids using it? Is it?
Yes, so it's both, actually.
Okay.
So it's 3 users. So the district will have access, the schools, so principals, teachers, assistant teachers, and students will have access to it. The goal is to be able to have students go onto the platform. They do the assessment. They create what's called a virtual learning portfolio, which houses their learning style information. And we also have them doing assessments and quizzes and tests through the platform that are then geared towards their specific learning profile. So we're able to take the understanding of their learning profile and take the objectives from their classroom and merge the two together to then create automated questions or assessments that are geared towards a specific learning style, versus, just kind of having the teacher create their own test. Which they still have the ability to, manually, create things, but the focus is really how do I take these lesson questions in math, understanding that this child, learns this way, how do I bridge the two? And bridging the two and then delivering it to the student, and then being able to see the insights and watch how that student is performing over time. The districts will have access to it to see how well their schools are performing, how well teachers, courses, and certain demographics are performing. Principals will be able to look into individual students. They'll be able to look at what we call archetype performance. So we've designed our own archetypes to assign different learning profiles. So they'll be able to see, okay, well, how are these learning profiles differing in say math versus, English or reading comprehension. And then of course the students have that information on them. So we don't own any of the data that we collect on the students. It belongs to them and their parents. So once the student, say, graduates from grade 6 to grade 7, they're able to share that learning profile with their new teacher. This teacher now has a deeper understanding of this student versus kind of waiting until, midterm to kind of understand, who that student is or who's struggling, who's not struggling. And we kind of want to erase that piece and give the teachers almost like a cheat sheet to their students and helping them with their internalization of who they are and how they learn, and being then able to create stronger lesson planning content. And that goes hand in hand with the training that we also do with the schools as well, because in order to be able to be an effective, culturally responsive teacher, you do need to have training and some background knowledge in the work.
Wow. So I'm just, as you're talking there, I'm just picturing myself using it and what it looks like. So I do a lot of reflecting with my students. So say, and it's kind of like their end of the unit test. We get away from tests, but I do it in written form, right?
Yeah.
And not every kid, and I put it in a chart, and I try and make it as user friendly as possible. But then there are kids, and what I end up doing is, modifying myself with another kid, and I realize, okay, that's not going to work for this kid, and maybe we need to do it verbally for this kid or whatever. But what you're saying is, I would know the kid, the AI would know the kids. I would put in the information, and it would spit it out according to the format that they need, whether it be like a mind map or a chart or questions and answers or whatever. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly.
Oh my gosh,
And
this is mind blowing.
And as the student uses the platform, the machine learning, it starts to get more intelligent and make, more intelligent insights. And then again, districts can then use that information to then start to inform policy changes, student success strategies, and things like that at the board level. So that's our hope, is that this data that's being collected could then be used to create policies and procedures that will continue to support the work and the students.
Well, I'm getting goosebumps. Like, imagine if I'm that kid, and then now they're using it in the workplace, and I go and I have to do training in the workplace. I just watched, and I've had lots of conversations with so many different people that go into training, and the people who are doing the training, they're not teachers. So they're doing what they know teaching is, and they stand at the front and they go through a PowerPoint, and at the end they write a test or whatever. Can you imagine if I then go into wherever, even if I'm a teenager and I go to McDonald's and I have to do my online training, and it follows me, and they have that same program, and then we would just be so much more productive.
Exactly. And that's what we're trying to do, because we recognize that the ministry has, put out their CRT monograph with their 9 characteristics of what, culturally responsive teaching looks like. It's sometimes it's easier said than done. And there's a lot of unlearning, as you had mentioned before, that needs to happen. And a lot of relearning that needs to take place as well. So our hope is that the two will work hand in hand, so that we can increase the capacity of the teachers, and really, because we know that we know that you love your students, we know that you want them to be successful, but sometimes it's hard to understand from a cultural perspective what a student may or may not need. And once you're able to really understand that, it really helps, the teaching experience to be a lot better, and it helps the students' experience to be a lot better. And our hope is that we start to remove a lot of the trauma that's happening to racialized and indigenous children in schools, with the redaction of their culture from the curriculum. It really is traumatic. And it happens on many different levels with different types of students, not just the Indigenous students, but it happens with Black students as well. And so we want to make sure that teachers are understanding that piece so that they can unlearn some of those practices and then understand how to best support their student in the learning environment.
So what does that look like in the app then? So like I'm wrapping my head around learning style.
Mm-hmm.
So how does the cultural part work within the app? Like how do I learn? Do they do questionnaires? Do they?
Yeah, so it's a proprietary assessment
Okay.
that one of our team members, who's also a doctorate in education, Dr. Tyra Good, has created for us. And so essentially, again, like we're taking, theoretical, research reports and being able to create our own archetypes based on what we've seen in the classroom exists in terms of learning styles, and then creating an assessment that would help to identify, is the student tied to archetype 1, 2, or 3, and then what does that mean? So then there's a detailed report that goes with this particular learning style and how they operate in the classroom, how to identify them, how to work with them, how to support them in math and reading, which are the two subjects that we focus on. Because those are the two areas that we feel are most needed for support. And so we have that piece that comes out so that the teacher can increase their knowledge about the different learning styles that exist. Because essentially, we have a very individualistic approach, which is very Eurocentric, very westernized. And then we have what's called a collectivist approach, which is very indigenous and African, Southeast Asian. And so we want to be able to break those apart, because simplifying it would almost be oversimplifying it. So we wanted to be able to break those down and create deeper archetypes that have different, differentiating factors that can help to play into how the lesson plans would be designed in the classroom.
So how many archetypes would there be?
So right now we have 7.
Okay.
Now that doesn't mean that every classroom will have 7.
Right.
Some classrooms might have 4.
Okay.
What we're seeing is that there's usually about 4 that will pop up in an individual classroom. So the intention is not for the teacher to have 7 different or 4 different learning plans necessarily, but it's really about, okay, understanding how each of these groups of students learn, perhaps having them work together, having them sit together, working through projects, but really, again, as I mentioned, taking more of a facilitator coaching approach versus trying to teach 20 different ways to 20 or 28 different students.
Yep.
Right? So kind of narrowing that down, because teaching one way to 28 students doesn't work either.
Nope.
So if we're able to identify, okay, these are 4 different learning styles. Now I know, okay, with the support of the platform, how I can modify my learning to see the best results, the best performance from each of these groups, and work with them that way.
This is amazing. And only imagine, I only imagine learning this in teachers college, right? So that you're not, if I learn this, what's that?
I said, right. Yeah. You think about teachers
Yeah.
college.
Like if I knew this kind of stuff, and we do, like we learn about, the different types of learners and that type of thing, but nowhere in there is that cultural piece. It's definitely, the kinesthetic, the audio, the visual, which is all really important. But I think it's really missing that relationship piece of knowing more than just I'm teacher, you're student.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that hierarchy.
Exactly.
Wow. My mind is blown right now. So I have all these questions, but I think we've talked about a lot of these things. Kind of looking at our current education system, I really want to look at what we need to do as a society to be able to move forward and use technology like this to our benefit.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think our society needs to unlearn in order to be able to move forward?
Uh, I would say one of the first things would probably have to be implicit biases. I think that that is a barrier to even learning new things. So being able to first acknowledge that we all have biases is one. Being able to identify when those biases are starting to play in, because sometimes we're not catching ourselves when those biases start to play in certain situations. So giving teachers the examples of when those elements might pop up in a classroom or with an engagement with a student, and how to then shift the thinking from, this biased sort of approach to an unbiased approach with students. I think that that's the biggest thing it really start, and I think that also really um, plays into the monograph that the Ontario Ministry has put together. um, it really starts with yourself. It starts, like Michael Jackson says, with the man in the mirror, right? You can't expect to change other people when there are things within yourself that could be causing them harm or trauma. And you may or may not know that. So that's the first thing I would say. And probably the most important piece that I've seen that needs to take place in terms of changing behaviors.
Right. And what about the technology piece? Do you
Mm-hmm.
do you think that there is I don't know, like a negative sort of vibe around AI and
Absolutely. Uh, Anytime people don't understand something, there's always going to be fear attached to it. It's just human nature, and I don't think there's anything different happening with the education system. Again, because teachers have been teaching for 20, 30 years, and they're used to teaching a specific way. That when you start to, and this is not all teachers, by the way, but when you start to make changes, there's this reluctance because I feel like some teachers may feel like their credibility or performance is being questioned, um, rather than taking it from the approach of, okay, well, this is what I may need to do to connect better with my students. So let me take the time to learn something new that may help me connect better with my students. So I think it's just a different approach. Um, a lot of people feel that artificial intelligence is coming for their jobs, and while that may be true for quite a few industries, education is not one of them. I think education is one of the areas where AI can complement teachers tremendously. And it doesn't have to be a huge learning curve either. But I think it again boils down to what are those goals that leadership is setting from a school board perspective. How is that showing up in my classroom? And making sure that your culture aligns with, technology, creation, innovation, uses of different types of technology. I think it just really comes down to like a culture shift within the organization, and then also providing supports, and also providing a bit of grace and understanding that not every teacher is going to get it right away, and people are fearful of not doing their best with using something new, or some teachers are better at using technology than other teachers, and you see that in the classroom. And just having some grace with that, and being able to provide that support, and also just understanding that we can't save everyone. I think is another piece of it as well. You have the early adopters, and you have those teachers who are always going to be trying something new and always going to be trying their best to incorporate different types of technology into their classroom. And then you have, like the laggards, like the people who just, you'll never reach them. And it's unfortunate, but it's one of those things that I had to learn as well, that you're not going to be able to reach and change everybody overnight. So the best thing to do is really start with those teachers that have really been identified as early adopters, as innovators, and using them as a catalyst to reach other teachers and be the example for other teachers as well. So that's our approach. That's my thought on it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I've learned that the hard way as well.
Yeah.
Um, awesome. Well, before we finish, we started a podcast with my social change makers in the summer, and at the end of every interview, we want to focus, like as a group, we want to focus on our brilliance and our superpowers. And we ask everybody, what is your superpower? I know you have many.
I would say my superpower would have to be setting ambitious goals and reaching them.
That's for sure.
That's that that's something execution, not always flawless, but I always try to be flawless with my execution and how I implement things. I think is something that has helped me in my career tremendously. And I also feel too that being able to identify solutions for like really big or stale sort of problems, you know, I think that that's also a really big piece, is taking something that's existing and making it better. I feel like has been the overarching theme of my career, is really looking at not necessarily recreating the wheel, but how can we, you know, take the wheel and make it better, make it more efficient, make it run smoother, make it look nicer, you know, make it last longer. I feel like those are the things that I would think would be my superpower.
Well, I think I read a page of, and we probably could pick out like 100 superpowers in there. But again, I'm honored to have you on the video series, and so happy that I came across your profile on LinkedIn, and you accepted me to be a it's not a friend on LinkedIn, it's a
Connection.
connection. Yes, yes. So thank you so much. If people want to learn more about
Mhm.
you and the things we've talked about today, where's the best place for them to go?
So the best place for anyone who wants to engage with TechSpark would be to go to techspark.ca. They can request a proposal directly from our website. They can see all of the work that we've done, that we are doing currently. For those who want to integrate Edulytics into their platform, we're going to be launching the MVP in October, and that will be something that will open up to teachers who are interested in becoming our first beta users. So they can sign up for that at edulytics.co. And if anyone wants to learn more about me or any of my ventures or my books or anything along those lines, they can go to my personal website, which is tamarhuggins.com, and they can follow us on social media with those same handles as well.
Awesome. And we'll put those in the notes below so everybody can find you.
Okay.
Thank you again so much, Tamar, for coming on. I really, really loved learning all about this.
Thank you for having me.